Hello everyone, welcome to my channel. It's Kim here, and today is part 11 of our hardcover journal. Making a journal from scratch using a hardcover book, removing pages. And the reason I say this over and over again is in case somebody new comes along and watches this first video and it's like part 11. So yeah, I'm just refreshing for the newbies and for us as well. So this is my journal cover. It is sort of done. I'm just going to quickly show it to you and what I did. You saw it before I put the trims on in the last video. So up the top here, I have a ruffled trim, and I've added some sequins and netting and some beads on top, and I'm going to show you how I did that. And then this was the edge of that scarf that I had talked about where I cut off the bottom strip with all the fringe. I wasn't going to do this on here, but I really liked it. So I did go back and add it in, and it wraps right around the whole book to the other side. You see this purple thing hanging out, that's coming up. So there's the top again, the ruffled trim goes right around. And then same with along the bottom, I have the same ruffled trim going around the bottom. And I will show you how I made that. And then I have some fibers that I crocheted, or you can braid, down the side. Now they both had, like I did the front to finish it, as well as the back to finish it. And I used a combination of colors, and I'll show you that in a second. For moving this around, it kind of, you have to keep combing it out. But I just crocheted it with a large crochet hook. And when you start your crochet, you always have a bit of a tail. I was going to leave the tails hanging, but then, you know, after I was done, I thought, no, I don't really like that. So I just cut it off at the knot at the top. And then where I ended at the bottom, or when the crochet was done, I cut it off at that end as well. So the same with braiding. I mean, if you're going to start with a knot to braid or tied together, you can always cut them off if you don't want the fringe. But I did keep the leftover pieces because I keep everything. So I will, there are some tails hanging here, but that's from something else inside the book. But you know, in doing this, my book is kind of alligator because there's a lot of stuff packed in here right now still. But I think it's always going to be an alligator book. So in doing this, I realize now that in some ways I kind of put the cart before the horse, because there are many things to making a journal. And if you've made journals before, you're probably way ahead of me, and you've made all kinds of pockets and tucks and embellishments and things on your own. But I realized over the last few weeks that I have a lot of new people that are making this journal for the very first time, or, you know, they're making, this is how they're starting. They haven't done any other journals. And so to go ahead and make pockets and all those things, it's a lot to teach everybody in one session. And so I realize now that I wasn't thinking about that in making this, that, you know, there are people who have never made a pocket, who have never made a belly band. So I'm going to say, for the newbies, I know whatever stage you're at, you're not caught up to me. I don't think you are. And for those of you that are seasoned, you will go ahead and work on your book however you want. But I think what I'm going to do for this session and maybe the next session is I'm going to just show you, you know, what I've done in the book, because I can't really proceed until I show you. So this book could end up taking, like, you know, 24 series or 36 series. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to show you what I did, you know, give you a brief explanation, and then I'm going to move on. But having said that, we will finish up the set of 12 next Monday. And I know it's Tuesday today. I got a little bit behind on the weekend. So we will finish up our series 12. Well, maybe we'll finish it up tomorrow. I'm not sure. Very soon. And then I had talked about doing a nesting journal that will sit on top, because, you know, it's kind of a flat book, and I like lots of stuff. So I want to do a 6 to 8 series of doing a book that I'm calling a nesting book that would sit on top. And the idea was to use a 9 by 12 manila envelope, and this will get decorated, and then we'll put in a journal signature, just like we did the other ones. But this one won't be a hidden spine. It'll be, you know, the signature ends will show on the outside. And then it'll have, you know, some pages inside here, and then we'll further decorate that. So that will make this kind of lift up off of the book to give you just a little bit more thickness. And it's just a nice, you know, to have this, you know, it's like an embellishment in itself to do the second journal. And the reason I'm calling it a nesting journal is it will sit within here, and I will, again, decorate it further to match all of this. Now, not everybody has the same size book that I have, so a 9 by 12 manila envelope isn't going to work for you. But if you have some envelopes, and I've got some different sizes here, you can take 2 envelopes and slip one inside of the other. And I will show all this in the next part here as well. So you can slip one side in here and either just glue it down on the outside and then start decorating. It's not about the envelope, it's about the size of nesting journal that you want to have. Because this is going to get completely covered. Same with the manila envelope, is going to get completely covered. We're not going to use it to make any kind of pockets or try to save this little flap here. None of that. It's just going to get completely covered. So again, you may have envelopes in other sizes that would nest on top of here. So you would just slip them. And again, we will do this when we're actually doing this part of it. And so you would decide which size you want. If you don't have envelopes that you can use or a manila envelope, just cut some cardstock and fold it in half to fit the size you want in your book. Because it's not about what you use. I mean, you could use a cereal box, you could use cardstock. It's just about getting a very soft, smaller journal book, sort of like a, you know, kind of a glorified notebook. How's that? So we can decorate it the same way and then continue on and create this sort of this large embellishment that's on top of your journal. Now, some of you might say, nope, this is enough for me. I'm done. And that's okay. But we will start the segments of doing this next. And that will just continue with the same. I'm going to work on mine with the same fabrics, the same trims, all of that stuff. And I will hopefully be able to show you even more techniques in doing that as well. But then next Tuesday, I'm going to start a brand new series, and I'm hoping I will do a follow-up this weekend to start it off. But I'm going to start a brand new series, sort of a back to basics series, where we will make a journal cover, and then we will put in several signatures, but it's going to be so basic. And then this book will be what I call your techniques book. And even the seasoned journal makers may want to join in with us. You know, the idea is it's for brand newbies and for people who just want to be reminded of different techniques and things that they've done in the past. So we will create this journal starting right from scratch, from putting in the signature pages, from covering the book. And then we will start filling it page by page. And when we get started, I think you will really enjoy this because this book will be a book that you can then use for reference in the future. You can flip through it and go, oh yeah, I made that kind of pocket. Oh yeah, I did that with a belly band. And it's going to be a fun way to continue to add to this book and then possibly make a second book for other techniques. So we will put in pockets and belly bands and tucks and tabs and flips and all those things into this book page by page. And then we will start filling those things, and you will eventually, the book will get to the point where it's a real chunky book. So you may have to go on to a second one, but this would be something that you would make that's nice and pretty, sits on your desk somewhere, and you can use it for reference. Sometimes you open up your book and you put something on the page, and it's like, okay, I know I want a pocket, but what kind of pocket? And you'll be able to refer back to your techniques book and look at pockets and go, oh yeah, I can make that pocket. So that is my plan, and it will be on Tuesdays, and it will be called something like Back to Basics. And the journal will, sorry, my dog just groaned in the background. When he sleeps with such gusto, and he just moans and groans, but he's such a happy puppy when he's sleeping. I just heard him. But anyway, we will do this on a weekly basis on Tuesdays, and it'll be Techniques Tuesdays, and something to that effect. And we will work on it all the time, until we run out of things to put in the book. So I hope that will also reinforce to use some of those techniques to come back, for those of you that are new and haven't done a lot of these things. You forget, when I say belly band, I'm sure some of you are going, what is a belly band? If I say a flip or a flop or whatever, a cluster or a snippet. And so these are things that I have to remind myself that new people need to see as well. So that will be starting on Tuesdays. I will be working on this one on Mondays. Once we've finished up doing the hardcover, the nesting book will start again on Mondays, and the techniques will be on Tuesdays, and each one will be a one video per day, so that it spreads it out a little bit so we can get caught up. And then we will take it from there. And I'm hoping that you guys will give me some comments below to let me know if you're on board to try this Techniques Tuesdays. And geez, it's already got its ring to it, doesn't it? So I think that would make things make sense a little bit more, and make things work together a little bit more. So I hope I'm not boring you with all of this. So once I make my nesting book that sits on top, some of you are going to ask about closures. Well, I don't like to put closures all the time. I mean, I do once in a while. I do glue in ties ahead of time and stitch them on. But I find that sometimes they're in the way when you're working on your journal, or when you're writing in it or adding things to it. More often than not, I make my ties separately. And this is just a piece of polyester, very stretchy material. And it's simple. It's just a black that I thought I would just tie around it. And then I will probably add some charms or something to it afterwards. I didn't even quite do that in the right length here. So you can find an old scarf and trim it down to make a tie. You can use a belt, some chain, but these are things that again, it depends on the person as to how experienced they are, as to how many books they've made, and how they want to make a tie. So this is something I would do only because I don't like the ties in my way when I'm writing. So I take it off, but it just gives a really nice presentation to have it all tied together. And then it's the unveiling, it's the opening of the journal, and just how much fun it is to have a journal like this sitting on your desk or your coffee table. And, in that case, you may not want to use it as a personal journal, because then, people might read it. But it is a beautiful book. So it might be something that you just keep and put fun mementos in there. So that is my thing on the scarf part of it. And the next thing I want to talk about again, which is something that I didn't really talk at all about in this book, is using inks and distressing your pages. Sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. And I haven't really done much in this book, but I will probably go back and do some inking when I'm completely done. If you watch other videos, people will ink every piece of paper that they put in a book. I don't always do that. Sometimes the colors don't lend to inking everything. Sometimes the style doesn't lend to inking everything. I just do what the page tells me to do. You know, sometimes you look at a page and you say, well, it's white, it's not finished, but I like it the way it is. You know, because I want to write in here. I don't always ink because your ink interferes with your writing, you know, so it depends on that as well. It depends on what you like. So it's a personal preference, ink or not ink, or ink at all, or be selective. And I will again do some techniques in the new books or the new book that we start to show some inking processes and how I do it. But I don't want people to get hung up on it, especially new people that don't have all of these crazy supplies. And you know, I always say, don't buy it right away. Find out if you really like doing this. You know, don't invest in a ton of money, you know, a ton of money in supplies or dyes or stamps or inks, because you get so caught up in all of that stuff that you end up with such a huge pile. And I'm no different than anybody else. I have a huge pile of stamps and inks and dyes and all kinds of things to play with, and I never use them. And so I find more and more that I have to force myself, which is why I really liked Kara's Forgotten Friends series, although I haven't had time to participate in it. Sorry, Kara, I would like to have done more. But you know, we get caught up in buying all this stuff and then find out that we don't really like it or we don't want to use it. So hold off on buying a lot of things until you're really sure that junk journaling is for you and that this is what you want to do and that you're already hooked completely. And then when you do, I highly recommend that you introduce yourself to things like this slowly, to get going with inking and you know, die cuts and all that kind of stuff. But let's carry on with the book for now, and we can refer back to that later. So in the book, I'm going to show you kind of what I've done, and some things I will show you what I'm going to do, and some things we will do together. So to start off with this cover, and how I did this ruffle, I have a piece of the ruffle here. And I'm just going to put this off to the side. Hope you can see. So I just tore long strips of my fabric. Now my fabric was a lightweight cotton. And so I just tore it into long strips. You know, you just take a piece of fabric and I'll just do one little piece here for you. And when it's cotton, you can usually just make a little snip in it, just like that, and tear it. Now I'm not going to tear huge pieces. I'm just going to tear a small piece here. And then you're left with those threads hanging out, and I just pull the threads until I got a little bit of a fringe, so it looks nice and distressed on its own. And then I went over to the sewing machine and I just put it into the machine, and I just folded over one little piece like that to start me off. And then you can use a pin, you can use you know, a nail file if you have. I just kind of, I don't know if you can see this, I just as I was feeding it into the machine, I just kind of folded and pushed. Now, you know, a pin is probably not the best tool, but I just kind of folded and pushed as I went along. And then when I got closer to the end, so, you know, the sewing machine is slowly sewing this down the center. Then I took my next piece and just added it just a little bit into the first one and continued to doing my folds until I could fold this into there. And it takes a little maneuvering. I recommend that you try to work with as long a piece as you can. But that was how I joined them. You can also stitch them together, joining them that way. And if you don't have a sewing machine, you can certainly do this with a needle and thread and just in and out a running stitch to gather it up. So that's how I did this long piece. Now, when I do them, I do mountains of it, because these are my colors, and I know I can use this from one journal to the next and for different projects within the journal. So I just did, I don't know, probably 2 yards, 3 yards of this continuous. And then I just, I don't cut it until I'm actually going to finish applying it. So when I was putting it on the book, and it wasn't at this stage yet, I did decorate it first. But when you're applying it onto the book, I hot glued it on, and I didn't cut until I wrapped around, knowing where I was going to end on the other side. And I did end a little bit shy. Am I in camera here? Okay. So I just glue and wrap until I went around to the other side. But I did start a little bit shy of the edge of the book, because I knew I was going to put this trim down to finish off the book here. So maybe about 1/8 of an inch shy of the edge. It was caught underneath with this trim, but just enough so that you don't see the edge of it. And then I just glued it around to the other side, doing the same thing on the other side. And then this way, when I got to putting this trim on after, I covered the rough edges of that, and then covered the edges of the book all the way down. So making the long ruffle, I wanted to incorporate some of this scarf, the glittery scarf and trim into making the embellishment that I wanted on the book. And I had my scarf pieces. Now I'm just going to grab some here. Now this piece here is what was left over when I wrapped the braid or the tasseled trim around the bottom. So I'm going to probably use this inside the book afterwards, or I may even use it on the cover of my nesting book. I will see, but I'm thinking I'll use it inside, because I still have the other edge of the scarf that I can use to make a smaller version of what I did for the cover. So anyway, I had all these little pieces. Now I kept the nicer floral clusters separate, because I think I can use those in snippet rolls and other things to adorn my book. And so those I kind of hoarded aside. But it's all these little swirls that I had left over that I used on my ruffle. So I took and I just trimmed them. Now somebody had mentioned to me, how were you able to trim that the sequins didn't come off? Well, I lost a few, and some I had to stitch back on. But for the most part, these little flourishes, they stop and start on their own. Like, not everyone does. So sometimes when you have things like this that you want to use to embellish other projects, you may have to go back and do some stitching to hold everything on first before you cut it, or when you cut it, be prepared to pull a few off before you use them. So I just kind of very loosely rounded the edges. Nothing fancy. I'm just making it so that it doesn't look choppy. Does that make sense? And I just kind of rounded it enough. And I didn't want it to be very wide, because I wanted it to sit on top of this ruffle. So that's all I did to add the sequins onto the ruffle. And now everybody's going to want to find this scarf. You'll find other scarves that are just equally as nice. And this one's got a little bit of a sharp corner there. I'm just going to take that off. So that is all I did to get this ready. But if you ever tried to glue netting onto something, it's almost, it's impossible. And especially if it's black, because any kind of glue shows through. Hot glue is brutal. It doesn't look nice. So I could sew this on my sewing machine, but you have to be careful of the sequins or any beads that are on here. You don't want to go through them, because it's great for breaking needles or snagging your threads. So I hand stitch these on, and hand stitch them on while I put on these little beads. So I'm just going to grab 3, and I recommend that you have something that you can sit them on because they are running around on your table very quickly. You know the saying, do as I say, not as I do. And then I just took a needle and thread, and I'm just going to quickly, oh, I was supposed to have this loaded and I forgot. Now, the first thing you do when you want to do beading on your projects is you make sure that your needle goes through your bead, because nothing like getting everything ready and then you go to stitch on the first bead and you don't have the right size needle. And I double my thread. And I lick it, yeah. And I hope I can get this in the first try on my camera while you're watching, because, you know, that's a little embarrassing when you don't. Oh, look at that. Okay, so I've doubled up my thread. And just knot at the end. So taking the first, and I'm not going to do the whole thing, I'm just going to do this one little piece here. So taking the first piece, kind of start where the end of the netting is, and bring my needle up through the back, somewhere where there isn't a sequin. Unless a sequin has fallen off, then I will add it on. And then I add 1 bead, and it can be any kind of beads. It could be pearls, it could be seed beads, whatever you have. It doesn't have to be anything fancy. It's just you want that little extra glitz and making a trim that nobody else has. And so then I'm just taking the needle and I'm passing it back through to the back. Now, when you're doing this, you want to make sure that you have everything cleared off your desk, because wherever this thread can catch, it will. So once I've put the bead, I hope you can see that good, that little bead there, through here, and I've brought my thread to the back, I turn it over and I knot it. Now, you might think this is overkill, but then I can make a whole 5 yards of this and cut it wherever I want. So if I don't want, you know, 6 inches, I can cut a 3-inch piece. And I know that my beads aren't going to fall off. And then if your beads are, you know, if your book is overhandled on, you know, once your book is made and it's overhandled, eventually you're going to lose a bead or 2. But if you do, you're not going to lose them all. Even though you've glued this down, you've knotted everything. So even if this bead comes off, the next one isn't going to come off because you didn't knot it. It's because you did knot it. So then once I've knotted it again on the back, I just move over, you know, however many beads I want. So I'm doing them about a 1/2 inch apart, but I just do it willy-nilly because you don't want everything to be matchy-matchy. You don't want it to be everything uniform. Otherwise, I don't know, I just like it to be a little bit different. So I had knotted it on the back, and then I brought the needle back to the front. So the first thing I'm going to do is make a knot. Now, everybody makes their knots differently. This is what works for me. But so now I'm going to feed that bead on. And going right back to the same spot where I came through, I'm going to stitch the bead on. And this is time consuming, yes. And then I'm going to turn it over and make a knot again. Okay, so that bead is now knotted on there. And I treat buttons the same way. I treat sequins the same way. I knot after every single one. Now, I've got this beautiful shiny, I hope you've been able to see that, shiny little piece here. So I'm just going to skip that. I just take my thread and I go right past it to this side of the netting or the sequin cluster. came through to the front, make my knot. Add my next bead. And going through the same spot where I just came up through. And knotting it again. So in doing this, like I said, you can cut it. It doesn't matter where you cut it. That bead is not going to come off because it's knotted from both sides. And look at this little collection of goodness. 3 little beads that I put on here, a little piece of that netting and the ruffle, and I've created a trim that no one has. If you had to go out and buy a trim like this, I guarantee you'd probably be paying anywhere from $7 to $10 a yard. So this is only one of many, many trims that I can show you in the future. But I can't do it all for this book. You know, otherwise we'll never finish this book. And so I'm going to proceed by adding one more little bead here, and then I'm going to knot the whole thing off altogether. So one more time. And go through, come through to the front. Make my knot. And I had only pulled out 3 beads. So now when I do this, like I said, I do yards and yards of it at a time, but I stopped only because I knew I was going to be showing you my procedure for doing this. And it's, you know, it's something that I can sit here and watch a YouTube video and sort of half stop and watch it while I'm doing this. And, you know, it's very therapeutic and relaxing. And in no time at all, I've watched 3 videos and I've gotten my trims made. And so if you even measure by the hour how much you're worth, yes, this trim is expensive to make. And I'm just going to cut my thread now because I'm going to use this piece after. And get that out of the way. Yeah, so in no time at all, you'd be surprised at how much yardage you can have of beautiful trims. And so to do the next piece, I would just move it over just slightly, because, you know, you don't want to completely cover up the original fabric that you had there. You do want to be able to see your original pieces. But I will just pick up from there now and knot the thread again and keep going. But that just shows you only one of many different types of trims you can make. You could, you know, it doesn't have to be a sequined netting. It could be a ribbon that you put down, and as you're stitching the ribbon on, you can bead it or put buttons. So all kinds of trim can go on here. Just to give you an example, I have some trim sitting right here. So this trim could go down the center just as nicely. It's just a very glittery trim. I don't know, I've been hoarding this trim for a while, but it doesn't really match with this. But this could go down the center and you wouldn't need anything else. You can just do a quick running stitch down the center of this. And I would, again, you know, I would do a running stitch, but every few inches I would knot it somewhere so that, you know, if you put it down, it's not going to come up and undone. But, you know, sometimes when you cut it, you may have to go back and touch it up. But it doesn't hurt to, you know, do the running stitch, and then about every 6 stitches, do a little knot so that you know that when you cut it, it's not going to come apart. But this in itself is very, very pretty to make. So that just gives you some ideas. Now, every little scrap that I have left over, including this netting, well, you know, not these really tiny pieces, of course, but these bigger pieces, I keep those because when you're going to make a cluster, you'd be surprised at how many of those little pieces turn into the most beautiful, intricate pieces of collage and snippets. Like I have, this was just a little piece that was lying on the table, a little piece of fringe, and I just tied it into a tassel. It's a little bit willy-nilly here. with the threads, but I just tied it into a tassel. So all of this stuff I keep until the very end. And even at the very end, I will go back and make a snippet roll where I will stitch all this stuff down in whatever way, however it unfolds in front of me, and I keep it all. And then I can use it for clusters and snippets afterwards. But I'm going to get this out of the way a little bit. And now we're going to go inside the book. So I've shown you sort of how I did the trims. And I used several fibers to make this braid. And so these were the ones I used. The gold, I wanted something a little bit shiny, but I didn't want it to be, you know, in my face shiny. I think I have to move the camera more this way. Okay. So I didn't want it to be really super shiny, but it's got a little bit of a sheen to it, which I liked. And it, you know, it's variegated in its color. It, you know, there's a combination of burgundy and green and orange and gold, which I just wanted it to be subtle. If you look at the sequins, it really does match the sequin colors. So I felt just a little bit in my crocheted fibers here would be nice. And then I chose this one. It has a little tiny bit of pink, but again, it was mostly the oranges and there's a little hint of green in there. So I chose that one just to, you know, give a little bit of contrast. And then this is a finer yarn. It's like a mohair yarn. And I use that because I just wanted to focus a little bit more on the darker orange colors so that it would pick up the orange in my fabric. And then of course the burgundy, that just gives you the darkness of color. I toyed with the idea of adding some black because there is black in the background. But I felt that the trim in itself was plenty of black. Same with the netting up here on the edges. It was plenty of black for this cover. So that was my reasoning and methods of doing that. So then I just took the 4 strands, tied them together, and made my crocheted trim. And then, you know, I just made a length of it however I felt I needed, and I never closed the loop. Where's my crochet hook? Now you've seen me crochet before, so I don't know if I really should bother, but I will. How are we doing for time? Getting up there, aren't we? Okay, so I just grabbed the 4 pieces. Not worrying how they matched up, and I just made that slip knot to start. And slowly start crocheting. Now I'm using a number 6 needle crochet hook. And I've said this before, and I'll say it again, I'm not the greatest crocheter. So don't judge me on my crocheting skills. But it doesn't take long to make this a chain, and you can just see a subtle little bit of that shine in there and a little bit of the green, and in no time at all you will have a long chain. So when I've made a long chain, I always make it a little bit longer than what I need. And I do each section separately, so I don't make it twice as long to do the front and the back of the book. I make each section separately. And so I make it a little bit longer than what I need, which I won't do now, but I leave the loop hanging because sometimes when you get to the other end, you are sitting past the book, so you don't really need that much. And so it's just easier to go back and undo those few after you've glued it. Okay, and so when you get to the point where you've matched up to the book, then you can slip out the knot completely, and then not the end of it. And I don't know if I'm saying that correctly here, so I'm just gonna let's assume that I've glued this all down and the knot is just at the very edge of my book. So I would cut the thread or fibers, and then taking my crochet hook, I would pull this loop out. Okay. So that now if I caught all the threads, because you do this while it's all glued together. Here we go. Oh, I guess I didn't cut all the threads, period. I hope that makes sense. So that when it's glued to your book and you pull out or cut the fibers and pull it tight, you will just be left with that little knot there that you can then finish gluing to the very edge top of your book. So that's where I made the decision, because at the other end, of course, I had one of these hanging down at the bottom because that was where I started. Okay. And then when I got to this end, I had one strand at the top, and I left it for a while, but then I finally decided, no, I didn't like it. So I just chopped them off at the ends, but I'm not going to chop this one off because I'm going to show you what I'm going to do with this. So I'm going to put the book aside for a second again, and I'm going to get these fibers out of my way. I may come back to them. I'm not sure. I have lots of bits and pieces to work with. But this little piece here, again, I can glue it down or stitch it down to a piece of ruffle and make a fun little clustery piece. I can stitch it down to a piece of fabric, or a piece of paper, I mean, or a piece of fabric, and just hot glue this down. In fact, let's do it, just so you see what I'm doing. I'm just going to put some hot glue there and glue this piece down. Now you can stitch it, glue it, staple it if you want. And then I'm going to tear this paper. And I have a really cute little cluster that I can use on a pocket. Now if I take my scissors, I can trim this down. And I've got a cute little clustery thing. There's a little bit of gold on that paper sticking through. It's got a straight edge here, so I'm just going to, after the fact, of course, tear the edge away. And I've got this cute little clustery thing that I can put in my book. What would I use this for? A tab to edge a pocket. Although, this is pretty thick, so it might be a little bit too much. I wouldn't do a lot of these. I'd maybe do one or two. But this is something that I can add in my book. And so we will go through the book now. And all these little bits and pieces, yes, I keep them because sometimes that's all you need is a little piece to tie into a knot or just glue down the side of a page. I've just tied this into a knot, and I can now trim this down. And I have another little piece that I can use to tuck onto a page. So, again, let's open the book. It is endless, and this is why, I have to watch my time because I can't really see here. Yeah, we're getting into quite a few minutes here. So I may have to pause this and do part 2. So I'm opening the book, and the first thing you see is this is where that trim started, was with that little piece there. So I just glued that down and then wrapped it around the book, gluing. Like I said, the netting is not the greatest to do this because it shows, but that is why I glued it just at the top, knowing I was going to put this trim over top of it so that covers any ugliness of the glue. So it's just a little tab in the corner of the page. It really doesn't do much, doesn't hurt the page at all, you don't notice anything. This was the end paper in here. So the very first thing I did was I made a little tab here so that I could hang one of these clusters on it. Now that is just what I have, but you know, if it hadn't been that, it could be something else. So to do that, I just took a piece of paper, you know, scrapbook paper there, you know, or whatever you have. It can be part of your book. I'm just going to use paper for just for the sake of this. And I just cut myself, I don't know, sort of a rectangular square piece. I don't know how to say it. And I folded it in half. And just like you would make a tag where you cut the corners, I cut the one corner. And, you know, for me, I would just do it without thinking. I would just trim the other side. But for some people that like to be perfect, you just take the corner you chopped off and use that as your guide for doing the other side. And there's your tab. So all I have to do is put a little bit of glue on here, glue it onto my page, wherever I want the tab to be. Now, I didn't want this to stick out. I just wanted to take away from the whiteness, and there was some writing underneath here. So I just added the tab there just to bring in the color from the other side and to be able to put one of these little clusters. It is totally fluke how this scarf matches the colors in this book. Totally fluke, but I love it. So the tab can be, you know, it can stick out of your page. To use as an actual tab, I would, you know, because this book has a margin, I would glue it down somewhere where I'm covering part of that margin, but then still have a bit sticking out that I can hole punch. I can add more decorative trims onto the edge of it. I have a little piece of that cluster that I had left over. I can now take this and glue this down to it. And add a little bit of course now because I'm on my desk here, you can't see anything. But I can add that little knot onto here, and I've made a really pretty little embellishment to attach to this page as a tab. It is, you know, like I said, there's just so much that I can show you and do that it, you know, I could be doing this forever. Going back to that little piece of ribbon I had, I can just add some of that onto there. I can stitch a button, I can stitch some pearls, and you can see the effect is different right away. So that is just to give you some ideas, and I showed you how I made my tab. Now I brought this to the corner, and I did cut the paper that was sticking out from the page, just because it matched nicely and it finished off the edge of the page with the tab. And then I did put a little bit of ink on here. You know, that's where I used a little bit of ink, was just to cover the whiteness of the paper cuts. So that was it. But this little piece now is just loose on the page. I hope the glare isn't too much here for you. And so it's just a decorative element that I've added to the page, and the tab really doesn't do anything, but because it's the beginning of the book, you know, this page will get a lot of stress, so it might help to protect this one page. I am not done. I will decorate a lot more and add a few more things on here, but I can't, like I said, I can't show you everything, otherwise we'll never get this book done. So here's one of the pages where I had added a pocket. I'm hoping you can see that. I used that end paper that I had cut out and just made a very lightweight tag, and I used some of those same fibers to make a tassel for the tag, and just tucked it in the book. Again, you don't want to be adding too much of this stuff because it does add extra bulk into your book. I played with the images, or the image that was there. This was a pocket I added on at the bottom. At the top, you can see the back side now of that tab. And just to bring it all together, I tore a little piece of my fabric and just fringed it and added it on there, leaving the rest of this blank. You've seen this page where I fussy cutted that pocket. It was just a perfect color combination to go with this green paper. Little piece of washi tape there. Nothing too much, but I will go back and decorate more. Same with here. This is a little too much white for me, but I just took the element out of the book and made a pocket out of it. And then this is just a journaling card. Here is again where I might add a tab. Where did my tab go? So I might just add one of these tabs to the top. And I can further decorate it, or I can just leave it like that. And let's just do it if I can find my stapler. Hopefully it's got staples in it. Now I'm going to staple it backwards so that the prongs are on the front. So it has a nice finish on the back and it's flat. And then taking my pliers, and you've seen me do this many, many times, I'm just pushing down the staples so that you don't end up stabbing yourself with the staples. And I have a tab on my journaling card. Now this can also, like, I haven't glued it down, so I may want to run some glue underneath here just to get it adhered a little bit better. But this is also where I could add something like this little cluster I just made, and that would cover the staples. But I don't want to add any more bulk into my book until I see how it is once I've got everything finished. So this is just to show you how you can add a tab and how you can embellish it with the little bits and pieces that you have left over. Another plain page, but I did the sections of adding journaling space on here, working with the image that was on the page. I used this little washi tape, full washi tape to cover up the writing. And then I wanted to bring some balance, so I just added another piece. This allows you to have, different little pockets of places to write or add a picture. I just had this lovely lady sitting in some ephemera that I had pre-cut for another project, and so I just added her on for a little bit of interest. Now this is a needlepoint book, so when I'm eventually done doing the basics to my book, I will go back and add some fabric needlepoint embellishments, but that is totally separate, and it's only based on the theme of the book itself. So when you turn the page, again, I've used different pieces to create writing space on the page. This was a piece that did I add that on? Yeah, I did. Yeah, I added that one in. And then this was on the page, this little tassel. I hope you can see it. See, I'm going out of camera here. There. And then this is just a flip. It is quite plain on the inside, so it's easy to write on, hides there. And here's again somewhere where I would put a tab. So you can tell this book is far from finished. This is the book cover. I love the cover as it is. I wouldn't do anything to it on this side. On this side, I had added that piece, and I just so far have added one element because I wanted to show you different ways of dressing up these pages. So that slides back into the book itself, but it opens up into 3 pieces. So I'm probably going to use some needlepoint and embroidery fabrics to add on here, to just little snippets of it, just to add some embroidery. And then on the inside is all the information about the book. I'm going to leave it, and there's lots of journaling space to write in there. But in folding the book cover, in order to make it fit in the book, I created this little pocket here. So I'm going to put something. I just stuck this in here to show you, but something will go in here, whether it's a journaling card, a large tag, or some writing paper. And then this will get further embellished. Because it's kind of plain on here, I don't want to completely cover it, but this might be a spot where I would use that leftover piece of scarf and have, attach that to the top and have that hanging down, so I can still flip it up. There's a fabric flip for you. So I can still flip it up and see the information on the book. I kind of like that idea, so maybe I'll leave that there. A decorative page, I haven't done anything with it, but it's a possibility of adding stuff onto it. When you turn it over, I have a journal card here, tucked into this little flip, which it was in the book that I glued into the book after I folded the page. I made one more pocket here, and then this is just to remind me to make a tag or a little journal card or whatever to go inside. Okay, I'm going to stop this, and I'm going to go into part 12. So just one moment.